Nothing much more annoying than whistling into a microphone. Hey everyone, hope you had a good weekend. We got some photos here, you know. I'm going to talk about it. If you're new to this program, that's what we do. You're paying to listen to me ramble. I don't get it, but hey, seems to work. What I've done this week is I've ordered it in what would be a faster critique to a slower critique. So towards the end, I'm going to spend a bit more time on these photos here, just because I felt I had what to say about it a little bit more in depth. And these, I'm going to just try and give a quicker bit of a lightning round. What do we call that? Yeah, quick critique. So let's take it from here. We got 19. This time was intentional because I had 20. And wait, why is it saying? See, it's so annoying. See, it says 20 items here, which does throw you off because it's got this, you know, Adobe Bridge put this little thing in there. Anyways, we have 19. One of you chose the not interested in a critique. And it's just a bit challenging to go back and add one because I keep a very elaborate log so I don't miss anyone. So that was a really exciting 1.5 minute introduction. I mean, I'm at the edge of my seat. I don't know about you guys. Speaking of chairs, we'll start here with Diane again. I'm going to go a little bit quicker here, and then we'll slow it down towards the end. I really like this. It draws you in. It's almost symmetrical, and I think that's the heart of the critique is if the chair here were centered, because I love this subject matter. It's just very intriguing. It's clean, it's symmetrical, but not quite. I mean, it's definitely off to the right. If this chair were just in the center, and then just we remove the distraction here of this empty chair on the left, we would have a more symmetrical shot. I do need to mention that I did not go over the captions this time. I didn't go through your photos one by one on the site to read what you wrote. So I think pros and cons to that. I don't have much context, but I'm able to judge and or give my feedback based solely on my initial visual experience of what I'm seeing without any textual context. So moving on. So this is interesting. I'm kind of gonna batch these four together here. They're somewhat similar. They're actually almost all like chairs in the woods. And what I've noticed also as far as story, I think these are more literal. Now I haven't read your captions, so you may have an elaborate story about the photo, but visually speaking, I don't think the photos have much more dimension than the subject itself, which is fine, but I'm pointing out that it's interesting that I categorize these, so to speak, towards the beginning, and then from like here and on, if we could just take a quick glance, story suddenly comes into play more and more with each one. There's a story here that kind of requires a little bit longer viewing time, I would say, for somebody looking at the photo to say, what is happening here? As opposed to these guys, because it's a more literal approach, it doesn't require as much viewing time. You're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, like it's a chair in the woods, got it. Now, I'm not saying right or wrong. It does, I do think at a certain level, story just becomes really important. It's not something you could do every week. It's not something I do every week for sure. In fact, I usually opt for more of the technical, like Lindsay's shot here. Like I would sooner shoot a photo like this, and it could just be my life stage of where I'm at and my available time. But kudos to the people that really try and craft a story each week, because it's not easy. It's not easy to do, and I think it really comes off as a more interesting photograph to look at in terms of uniqueness and trying to, figure out what's going on. Ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. Again, not right or wrong. We'll leave it at that. So what do I have to say about this on a technical level? Well, mostly it comes down to composition. For this, I feel like the chair is actually looking in the wrong direction. It's a bit of a funny sentence that the chair is looking somewhere, anywhere, any direction, but the chair does have direction to it. And if you could picture somebody sitting down, then maybe it becomes more apparent that they're very clearly looking out of the frame, that they're not sitting into the frame, which means we can't see what they're looking at, which means we just feel like we're blocked from the scene, some of the story, and it's uncomfortable, which could be what you want. I don't think that was the intent for this. Also, we have on this side of the frame this huge, relatively dark, actually quite dark pot over here in the foreground. What is this pot doing, right? What is the story here? If the story is the chair, then we could have just, framed it something like this and then had some more stuff going over here that we could see into. I think that would be a little bit more pleasing. If the story is the pot, what is that story telling? It just takes up a lot of room, a lot of visual space, and it's extremely dark. It actually distracts us a bit from the story, from the visual. Karen, on the other hand, I'll skip Barb for a moment. I think this is positioned beautifully. This is actually looking into the frame. Nicely nestled into the bottom right corner. I think this is a good way to frame something like this. Perhaps we're cutting off the legs, but I can't really see that, so I couldn't say. But my critique for this is also it's a little bit lost. What is the story here? We barely notice a statue that's lost in the green shadows. What is that statue trying to tell us? Why is it there? Could it have been removed? We can't really see the chair, right? If the idea is that the chair is lost in nature, perhaps we could have panned back, shown more of the picture, shown this dense green foliage that just completely consumes the small white speck of what used to be a chair. But we're not seeing that here. We're seeing a whole lot of chair. Again, it's funny that I crossed over into a story critique, but perhaps that is what's lacking for me when viewing these. What is the story you're trying to tell? Even if you're just shooting a product, if you will, just a stationary subject, let's say like this one or like this one, there still could be a bit more of an elaborate story, which I think these two photographers on some level had perhaps an additional element, an additional dimension of story there on a subtle level than at least what I'm seeing for these shots. We'll skip to Deborah here. I don't have that much of an issue with composition. It does look like you're cropping off, that you're chopping off this bottom leg, but we'll bring this up quickly into Adobe Camera Raw because it does look a bit green. Now, the way to see that or to test that, if you can't see it, is to go to your white balance here and click on auto. See what Adobe says. And we see here it tints plus 25 to magenta. So it's introducing a lot of purple. Well, it's not purple, it's magenta, purplish, purple, pink. And that is the opposite of green. So what that is essentially saying is it's too much green. We need to take down the green by adding some magenta. And you can see here that's a bit more pleasing to look at. And we'll go back to Barb that we keep skipping over. And, it's a similar effect for this where compositionally, we have now two foreground elements. Well, this isn't quite foreground, but we have two elements here on either side. What is that coming to tell us? Perhaps those are chairs also, I'm not sure. But I think the main subject here is this guy. Perhaps this could have been a good crop. It's a very interesting looking chair. It would have been nice to get some of that detail. And we're just here with this view, we're seeing a lot of distracting elements. And it may not be, like I often say, go all the way out or go all the way in. I think this may not be all the way out because we're just kind of seeing these half subjects here that, because I don't know what it is, it's a bit distracting. I really like this one, Corey, and the tail is a little bit cut off. There's a lot of shadow happening here. This isn't so much of a critique, more of one of those, I wonder if, but I think I would have cropped, maybe use this interesting swirl here, this curvy line as somewhat of a leading line or an interesting frame on the right side. And I think this somewhat captures what I'm seeing as the interest. The cat does look a little bit out of focus here. Perhaps your focal your focal point really rested over here on these whatever it's called on the chair. And maybe it's just because the tail is cut off that I'm like, well, if you're going to cut it off, you're already, you know, you're not all the way out, then you may as well go all the way in. No, not that much, but you know, something like this, I think to my eye could look a little bit better, but it is an interesting shot. And you know what, when you see, let's test this out. I didn't try this before, but when you see something that's very light and shadow heavy, very contrasty, where there's just shadow play, it could be good to try and convert this to a black and white. Once you're in black and white, you can do all kinds of stupid things like raising the contrast a whole lot, which I did just by lowering the blacks and raising the whites, which is basically contrast. Now this is, you know, a bit much over here, but you know, it's just fun to play with. It could have been something interesting. I'm not saying right or wrong, just playing around. And then, you know, something like my crop, I think would have looked something like this. Let's put that in full. To my eye, this is what I saw as the photograph. These lines from, you know, created from the pattern of the chair, which is fine. It gets a little bit lost in this type of edit that you have here, this type of processing. Here that's more pronounced. Maybe that wasn't what the photo was in your eyes, so you know, again, that's just my opinion being offered. Angie. So Angie, first of all, this is the most beautiful lamp I've ever seen. Like, what is this? Excuse me, dog. I'm trying to... I mean, is this like a turned burl that's blue epoxied into the cracks to make a lamppost? I mean, look at this lampshade. What is that? That's just beautiful. Like, what is happening? Where did you buy that? That is the most interesting lamp I've ever seen. It's just so interesting. And the table. I mean, where is this from? I want this table. That's what I have to say about your photo. Maybe that should have been, I don't know, have the dog sit on that, call it a chair. To me, that's the most interesting. I was like, wow, look at that lamp. That is so cool. Is that just a huge wooden knot, like a huge burl from a tree that's somehow turned and made smooth and then filled in with this blue stuff? It's wild. I must know the story of that. Yeah, what else? Yeah, the dog, yeah, it looks great. Okay, next. I'm joking. I mean, it's nice that you're using the window light. It's a nice, loud chair. You know, I'm wondering now, looking at it, is if you actually should have cropped out what I think is the most interesting part of the photograph. And, well, we can't do it like that. We'll open it up here. And just shown the chair, because it's so loud, the chair. And I think maybe that just speaks to, in general, what I'm seeing here, which is a little bit of a... Oh, that didn't work. Actually upgraded my Adobe camera, hoping that the crop will work a little bit better. And it does, for the most part. Something like this, I think, actually is a little bit more balanced in light. Because over here, your original crop, we have a lot of shadow going on. And maybe what's most bothersome, if you will, to my eye, is that the dog here is just, in a way, looking out of the frame. He's just on the right side here, towards the shadow. And if you were in the center of the chair or to the left over here by the window, looking this in, you know, in the same stance, I feel like that would be more balanced. If you can picture that. His body language, his body direction is this way, is looking this way. So he's kind of, even though he's looking at us, his body's kind of looking out of the frame. Similarly to my weirdness over here where I'm talking about Jane's chair looking out of the frame. Maybe I shouldn't be calling it looking out of the frame, but I mean, that is what it is. That is what I'm seeing. So something to keep in mind. Not easy to just have like dog placement wherever you wish. I understand, but that's what I got to say about that. Roger, it's a nice photo. I'm interested to, I'm interested to read your critique. Actually, in general, taking a photo of a miniature of, some detail of some thing that an artist did at some point, you know, it's in that gray area for sure. If you took a photo of a painting, then that's going to be flagged. We don't delete it, but, you know, we have somebody comment on the photo that, you know, the painting's not yours. Is this really an original photograph? As opposed to somebody painting a photograph, or I'll take a step back, taking a photo of somebody painting a painting. That was confusing. Anyways, if you're still with me, then I'll continue. If you're not, just close your eyes, do 2 minutes of meditation. I'll be done soon. That would create some context, and it would be an original composition. Here, assuming you didn't carve out this little miniature, so you're taking a photo of somebody else's miniature, there is some context here. I think it's interestingly shot. It's not like just a white background. But again, taking a photo of somebody else's creation without any context is a little bit like people take photos of, you know, like their kids' toys or like a piece of Lego, like with no context. Just like, what are you actually doing? Like, and how's that different than taking a photo of somebody's product? You know, no photographer has won an award for taking product photos for somebody. You know what I mean? Anyways, I do wonder why you shot this in like this very harsh daylight. I don't think it looks bad, but perhaps it could have looked better with a nice softer golden light at golden hour. And finally, the crop at the bottom. You know, if already you've placed this thing outside, what is this? Santa Claus looking at letters? I'm actually now looking at it. It does look very cool. Then, you know, show us the piece, you know, give it some breathing room at the bottom. Okay, moving on to math. Math, great chair. It does look way too dark to me. And now I see these lights. This looks, maybe this is a reflection and this is a neon light on the wall. And it could be that you were duped, that you were misled, that you were okay, I'm going to stop there. By the histogram here, because if we look at the histogram, we see there's stuff going on the whites, there's stuff going on over here in the highlights. The blacks does look a bit hot, looks a bit high over here, but, you know, not too terrible. It's not like all over here on the left side. However, when you have the visual context, you can see that this is not fair because you have some really bright light over here, and that's going to show up in the histogram. Adobe doesn't know like what it's looking at or what the main subject is. It's just giving you the representations of all light and shadow that exists in the frame. That is what this waveform that's called a histogram is telling us. So we have very bright lights, very bright whites, we have very dark darks. But the end result is that the subject that we're looking at, which is this chair, is extremely in the dark. Now, the way we can zone in on a more accurate histogram is going to our crop tool momentarily. And I'll choose like a whole big swath of this chair. And we could see now this is a more accurate histogram of what we're looking at from the main subject of the frame. 0 highlights, 0 whites, 0. Oh, they all say 0. My bad. So when you raise, you can raise it up. I see. Okay, so not 0. It is actually 0 highlight. You see, there's 0 data here on the right side. I do stand by that very confident proclamation from moments ago. If we go to our editing tool and we just bring up the shadows, bring up the whites. If I'm just looking at the histogram, I would think this is starting to look a little bit better. Now, obviously that's going to be way too much for this, and we're starting to get all kinds of wacky things. But if we then somehow either exposed beforehand or we had the ability to bring this back down, then the chair, I know this looks stupid, but the chair is actually exposed a bit more properly now. Now, you can't bring this up after the fact on a JPEG. That's why we're getting all this noise and grain and whatnot. But the chair, it was terribly underexposed. And again, perhaps you were misled by the histogram just reporting on what's going on in that whole frame. Okay. Jill, it's an interesting subject. Without reading your caption, I'm not exactly sure what the story is. I assume if I were making up my own story, I would say this is your son and was his favorite book growing up. But like, I don't know. Maybe this actually, now that I'm looking at the chair, it's probably his chair that he used to sit in. But looking at it just visually, why we cropping out like the most important part of this photo for chair week, you know? We're missing the whole bottom of the chair, missing his feet. So taking a step back really would be my suggestion here. And I think it would really tick off, the creativity, composition, and technique in, creativity, story, and technique in the composition. Okay. Beth, I really love this shot. I think this starts to now tick off all boxes. The composition is pretty good. A little bit too much space on the bottom for my liking. I think if you just tilted the camera, pointed up just slightly, I think it would be better to have less space at the bottom here, a little bit more space at the top. But this is really good looking into the frame. See how he's sitting here on the right side of the frame here, looking in. And we get that breathing room. We have some nice depth. We have some nice colors here. So not much to critique here. But if I could take this a step further and think, well, what would be the least amount that you could show while still retaining this story? Because there's a lot going on here. There's a guy at the beach. There's a Corona beer in the sand trying to bring Corona back. Man, is Corona going to have to like rebrand? They have to rebrand, right? They're going to have to call it something else. Corona beer or something. I don't know. I personally am still drinking Corona. I'm not going to let it hold back because then the terrorists win. Am I right? So let's zoom in. Let me see. Let's see. Okay. I'm just playing around here. But let's say, boom. If this was your photo, I think maybe the story is still there, which, is interesting. I'm not saying this is a better photo, just food for thought, as far as story, as far as not showing us everything. This could have also been a cute technique or cute framing for the chair challenge. All right. So, all right, we'll do, these were supposed to be quick, but I'm looking at the clock now, 23 minutes, not like super quick. It's actually probably just the same as always. So I'll try and, we'll get to at least these last four will be a little bit more in depth. Dan, I think this is really great for story. I think story-wise, we're getting a little bit more story-heavy as we go. That wasn't my intention, but it just happens to be how it landed. For me, it's a really clever shot and a really nice story. But again, just cropping the bottom of the chair. It looks like you and Jill, we're shooting together that day. Oops, don't open up. Photoshop, hit enter. So, even if it's a shadow, we need to see the bottom. Maybe there was the floor there and the floor was a different color and you felt that ruined the effect. Maybe, but to me this just looks like a crop where I'm not quite seeing the whole subject. Duncan. This is such a cool shot. And it seems to me that the chair is being lifted by the balloons. But I didn't even zoom in. Now I can see, well, you got a little bit of dirty brushwork over there. But I say it seems to me because there's just so much going on in this photo that it's not super clear. I mean, if you took this flying chair and put it in here, you and B should have collaborated over here. Maybe we should have more collaborations. That would be cool. That we can then talk about on the screencast. Bring this to a field. Bring this to some open skies. It would be way more clearer that the chair is being taken away by balloons, maybe put a person on it. In the context of this wall with a crooked painting. Why is this crooked? All these chairs on the floor, this window shade, there's so much going on that the illusion of levitation is missing or somewhat lacking. It's just not clear enough. And I think it's really nicely done, but clear the clutter. Clear all this foreground, make it super clear what you're trying to show. Lonnie. I think every other week I say Lonnie or Laney. Again, this is such a clean image, and there's not much to critique here as far as the technique. As far as the story, though, I do wish there were a little bit more interest. Now, I didn't read your caption. Actually, I did look at your caption, and there was no caption because I was just so curious. So without any backstory, I do feel like as clean as it is, and as technically perfect as it is, I wish there were some more elements just to bring a story home, even if it were just some items over here or an item over here, a plant, or maybe bring the Corona beer and so what's it called, a little sandcastle bucket type of thing with a pail, like a kid's. See where my head's at, to make it look like you're at the beach, quarantine beaching. That would be like a story that you would just bring in here, which maybe was your intention. Again, really clean, seamless white, nicely lit. Taking it to perhaps more of an advanced level, I think more story could have been dropped in here to give us an even deeper dimension. Lindsay, lovely chair. I'm not sure how big it is because, again, didn't read your caption, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is super tiny. A little bit in that gray area where I was bugging Roger about, but I think it's really nicely shot. The background, to me, maybe a little bit too flat. The whole image maybe just to be a little bit too, like, two-dimensional looking. Or could I say one-dimensional looking? If you had gotten some contrasting light, let me see if I can play with this in post, some kind of gradient like that, or if we went to a radial and something like that and made it more orangey or bluey, or just, something that makes it look, okay, that's a bit too crazy, just a little bit different. I don't know. I don't think that looks better, but like a little bit of variance, a little bit of a variable, I think would have helped the shot a little bit more. And again, you could have utilized that with another light perhaps, or just creating some shadow, or in post tweaking the colors just a bit. That may have highlighted your product a little bit better. Okay, routing out the last four here. So Patty, congratulations, lovely photo. There's so much more to an image today when you see a bride than if it was just 2019, right? So a couple of technical tweaks that I would make. First off, now that I'm looking at this now, actually, it does look a bit askew. Double click on our straighten tool. That's better. I thought it would cut off the dress, but you're still just clear. I think that's worth it. Losing some of the crop there. But to me, overall, it just looks a bit dark. Now, again, the histogram isn't too bad. I mean, it does look like it could be, it could be raised slightly. Even that, I think, makes quite the difference. But again, we're going to do our crop trick, which I should probably make an off the rails about this crop trick. What did I say a week or two ago that I said I would make an off the rails about because it was interesting? If somebody remembers, unless I did already, that would be helpful. I'm always like scrambling the brain for new off the rails ideas. So crop trick. What do we do? Oh, because we already straightened it, so it doesn't like that. Okay. So we're gonna make it diagonal again so that we can zoom in. Okay. So here's our subject, and we do see a little bit dark, right? So we'll raise like shadows, highlights, not really moving. Raise the whites. Let's raise the exposure. And we can see here in this little thumbnail that actually does look brighter. It looks much nicer. So we'll come here, we'll reset the crop. And that's not bad. That's not bad. It looks like your lens is a little bit glary. So you may need to clean your lens. But we'll look at the before and after now. And you can see we just kind of turn the lights on a bit. As far as white balance, there's a lot of white here. Not too bad. So, congratulations to you, to your friend, your cousin, whoever that is. Okay. Be cooler. So this is a little bit more of an advanced. I should have done these three first. Man, my voice is shot. So a little bit more of an advanced commentary on compositing. I'm not speaking slowly for dramatic effect. I couldn't think of the word. So, when you composite, the first half of the challenge is just getting clean cuts, and just being able to cut out what you want to cut out and paste what you want to paste. And I mean, all that looks clean enough. Not entirely sure what's real here and what's not, which is a good thing. The second half is having these new subjects in your scene blend with the existing environment. And sometimes that means making it look less good. And right now, this subject here, which is you, I think that is you, right? Is looking, a bit too orange, golden light, which is nice, but I don't see that really existing here in the foreground. Definitely not the background. We'll take a brush here. Gonna lower the white balance to a cooler blue, and we're just gonna paint on okay. Bit much on the arms. Your skin is starting to look blue, and let's actually lower saturation here a smidgen. Okay. Now you don't look better, but to my eye, you match the scene a little bit more. The colors blend a little bit more. A bit too much on the here. Something like that. Before, after. Now my issue is not what looks better. My issue is what looks more real. So again, this before, you're just popping out. This gold is popping off the page, which makes it look like a cutout. Makes it look like a very clear composite. Whereas here, okay, your eyes have to adjust a bit because the skin looks a little bit blue. But it's, I'd make a little bit less blue here. I think desaturation is a better way to go. Let me click here. Make it a little less blue. Desaturation. Yeah, and to me, that looks a lot more natural. Alternatively, we can keep you super orange like you were. We'll go to our gradient tool, make this super yellow, and is that right? No, this way. Sorry, I got a holes in my mouth now. It's the only way I'm gonna make it. We'll make this super orange. I know it's kind of ridiculous, but like now I think it matches. I didn't touch your face. Notice, look before and after. I'm just matching this golden orange that you have on your face here with the rest of the environment. And now you look like you blend in a little bit more. The colors are matching a little bit more. So when you're doing composites in general, it's just so important to constantly ask yourself, does this look like it's in the scene? What would make it look more like it's into the scene? Do I need to desaturate? Do I need to saturate more? And that'll really help from looking like you just kind of cut it out and paste. Danny, I saw your behind the scenes on Instagram. It's great. I mean, I love the sweat marks here. It took me a second. First, I thought like he was a villain, not a villain, like a superhero that was electrifying, that was charging the battery. But now I'm seeing he's being tortured because it's wrapped around him and he's being electrocuted. So you had a couple of difficult decisions to make because you clearly wanted the headlights on to give that element of electricity. But the only way to see the headlights, you had to darken the whole rest of the scene. Maybe you shot it even in the evening time, although I'm not convinced you did. But it gives it's kind of a weird like on-camera flash type of look where because it's so dark, I'm not really seeing the whole story as much. So first of all, what you could do, since it's already this cinematic type of story, is I would have enhanced that by going to my split toning, shadows, and giving it like a, yeah, like that guy. Something like a real bluey type of shadow, and then your highlights, of course. Your highlights could be a little bit bluey also, even, but we'll just stick with the orange here. Holding Alt or Option, by the way, when you play with these sliders, will give you a preview of what it looks like with 100% saturation. That gives you a good suggestion as to what hue color to pick, and then after that, you can saturate it as much as you want. Now this is, I think, stupid looking, but at least it gives like a little bit more of a cinematic look, which I think then makes this whole darkish Christopher Nolan tone more forgiving and more understanding. The other thing that is concerning, we'll just lower this a bit, since I myself had a little bit of difficulty connecting the dots as to what the story was, is I'm noticing just a complete lack of exposure here on his hair. So if I got a brush here with some exposure and just brighten that up, I mean, I don't know if you did, but I would think a nice element to add would just have his hair standing straight up. That would really sell the effect of like what the story is. And perhaps you did. His hair does look a little bit askew. But there's just not enough light there. In general, I think you could have added a little bit more light into the scene, and perhaps a similar critique to your astrophotography shot. You know, we take a brush and, you know, raise shadows, raise exposure, and just a touch here, a touch there. Maybe bring up the shoes a little bit. You know, we don't have to change the fact that it's nighttime, and we're not going to touch these headlights, but just a touch here and there may cue us in. Here, especially his hands, you know, those should have been maybe the brightest part of the image. I'm able to like light up all these things without really affecting the image, because in general the image was really dark. You know, once again, a product of perhaps the histogram throwing you off because of these bright headlights. So to me, this looks a little bit more clear, a little bit more cinematic. We'll just look at the before, you know, after. Before, it's a little bit dark, a little bit grungy. The colors are okay, but I think here just gives it, I think, a little bit more of an effect that you were going for, at least the kind of story that my eyes saw. And finally, Susan. We have a lovely daughter-in-law here. So, first off, chair's a little cropped. Foot is almost cropped. Very close. I mean, look, it's not easy, you know? It's a lot to think about. It's a lot going on here that you got right. But my job is to make you feel like you got it all wrong. That's what you pay me the big bucks for. So yeah, a little bit more space on the bottom. I forget who it was last week. What was it? In the comments section, we're just going back and forth, and I said that's my job, just to make you doubt yourself. Like, should have done that. You know, perhaps if you were cropped out and then placed the subject more to the right, then we would have had even more breathing room here. Look, you know, the quote unquote looking into the frame. It's okay. It doesn't bother me that much. I think it's a good placement, as with the exception of this bottom area. But more important is the exposure here. Once again, bit misleading because there's a lot of bright areas here. Can't really rely on your histogram, but what we want to be properly exposed is this area right here. And we look at our histogram, this is what's actually happening. We've got nothing over here. So go to our sliders. It's a lot. It's a lot to unpack here. Now, okay, it's going to be a stupid amount. Let's lower that. Raise. Okay. I mean, whatever. It's already a stupid amount. Let's take a look at how bad that looks. Hey, that's not bad. Before, after. Now you may ask, like, but what about here, Yosef? It's all too bright. Okay. But more important is that we see our subject clearly. More important is that we have proper exposure on your person's face. So if it really concerns you over here, what you can do is shoot in RAW and shoot a little bit lower. And instead of doing these global things like I did, take a brush, use the same settings and just brush on over here and you'll keep that low. Or you could take a brush, do the opposite right now, lower the highlights, lower the exposure, and oh my God, and bring that back down, right? There, it was like that. We lower that and now it's good. Or if you can't do any of that, I still say better to have some blown out highlights but a well exposed face than this, where your highlights are, nicely in the safe zone. You're not getting any reds, let's say, if you're toggling on the, show clipping warning, but everything else is really dim and we can't really see the subject. So I would brighten that up. For this type of photograph, you can really go crazy with the yellow. And obviously that's too much, but you're already in that look. You may as well embrace it and just go golden. Go big or go home. Not that that's going to be accurate, but I just think it looks cool. So that's what I have to say about that. I think there's some interesting patterns and threads that occurred here in this critique, as far as using that cropping trick, proper exposure on your subject, story and composition, and exposure. Well, that was fun. In hindsight, I kind of wish I did some of these heavier ones towards the beginning, but that's the gift for those of you that stood through 40 minutes of babble. Maybe you got some more in-depth critique towards the end. But either way, I'm really impressed with all of these shots. These were a joy to look through. Hope you enjoyed and got something out of this. I wish you all a super pleasant and healing week, full of good vibes and no stress, because that's just the kind of life we live. Thank you all for the continued support. I'll see you guys next week. Happy shooting.